Hey, good morning, Mike.
Hey, James. Good morning or good afternoon
Nice.
for you over there
Good
in the UK.
afternoon for me. Good morning for you. So I'm joined today by Mike Panos, who works for Skyfi. Just remind me, Mike, your job title is you've got quite a lot of
Yeah,
responsibility, I think, haven't you, at that business? So what's your role there right now?
yeah. So the title is officially Vice President of Operations, which kind of encompasses a whole host of things, operations, along with the product side of it, and then all of our back office things. I was previously the Chief of Staff at Skyfi and have held on to pretty much all those responsibilities as I've taken on the ops and product teams also. But yeah, it's a super exciting role. Lets me have a hand in many different parts of the business and just kind of it's honestly a great learning experience too to have finance and have a hand in some of the HR functions and everything else that helps run the business that is kind of the less glamorous part of it as well. But love working with the ops and product teams and we've got a great group over there.
And I think that's just a great insight already, isn't it? To like life in a scale up. It's like, hey, I've got this big job title, and it kind of means I have to do a whole bunch of stuff, and it keeps you really
Right.
busy. Um,
Exactly.
we're gonna have a really good chat today about your journey and
Mhm.
some of your insights as a leader, and share some stories and things that you've learned over the years. But I'm dead keen to rewind a little bit with you because your background is very different to maybe your typical leader in a technology business. So tell us a bit about your journey and where you've come from to sort of get where you are today.
Yeah, I've kind of taken a little bit of a roundabout way to get to this position, both in the tech world, but also more specifically in Earth observation and geospatial data. Um, I think if I could think back to myself as I'm graduating from the Naval Academy, which is kind of giving away what a little bit about what my background was. And said, 17 years later, you'd be at a startup in Austin, running operations and product for a geospatial company. I'd be like, I don't know what any of that is. So it's kind of interesting to think back on where I was and how I got here. So just in terms of background, after I left the Naval Academy, I was in the U.S. Navy for 10 years on active duty. I was a helicopter pilot, primarily out of San Diego, but moved around quite a bit. Did a couple aircraft carrier deployments to the Pacific and the Middle East. Was a flight instructor for a period, and then did a tour
Wow.
with Naval Special Warfare, so the Navy SEALs as a kind of an operations liaison and working some of their logistics and helping them out on a deployment to the Middle East as well. Kind of around that time, I was looking around at what could I do else in my life also. As a pilot, our commitment is 10 years once we enter into the service. So kind of that was the point of do I stay in the Navy for and make it a career, or do I move on to something else? If I stayed in for a few more years, at that point I might as well have just gone on to retirement and made that a
Right.
career maybe. So it was really the decision point at that time. And I decided that there's more out there that I want to explore. I didn't know if it was going to be tech, if it was going to be consulting, some sort of finance or banking role. I was really always interested in business, and I was an economics undergrad, so it was kind of something that I always thought maybe I would go into. And there was an opportunity coming up on my initial contract to pursue that. So applied to some MBA programs and was lucky enough to get accepted into Harvard and spent 2 years up in Boston. After living in San Diego, I got very spoiled by the weather, which is perfect here now. And then moved to Boston where the winters never end, and I had to find a way to get out of Boston. I love the city, but I just can't do the weather up there. So I started looking around at other cities and also the industries that I was potentially interested in going into. When I
So is
was
it
there.
is this you going from because I find it interesting people that have transitioned from military into business, and
Yeah.
it's actually a very it's more common than you think.
Mhm.
So it's a bit, I suppose, cliche, but people who have served in the military tend to be very successful at business because of, I guess there's the discipline and the fact that you've done, I imagine going off into a conflict related area is a lot harder than going into a boardroom, right? Even though going into a boardroom is pretty difficult. Um, One of our clients, for example, is a leader in a scale up cybersecurity business, actually out of Texas as well, and his background is military. So at that point, are you going from like clearly a salaried role,
Mhm.
and you're probably obviously you're well into your career by now, so I imagine you've got outgoings and stuff. And then when you go to Harvard, are you like back to being like a student, like No salary, no income.
Yeah, no salary, just a student. I was, a little bit of supplemental income from being a reservist in the Navy. So I've been able to, I've actually continued on with service as a Navy reservist. So it's kind of a part-time role. Allows me to travel around the world. Actually, I was in London doing some stuff with the Navy over the summer, which
Okay.
the time over on that side of the pond. So basically, there's other opportunities. So I was able to get a little bit of supplemental income from that when I was at Harvard. But yeah, it's back to being a student. It's living off savings and trying to it was very interesting going back to school after 10 years being out of school and not thinking about a textbook for a long time. And then here I am in this environment, all super type A people from consulting, the McKinseys and BCGs and all the investment banks and people who have done really interesting things that were younger than me. Honestly, when I started in business school, I was 33 when I came in there, and the average age was probably 27, 28, and some very accomplished people. And at first I was like, am I supposed to be here? Did they make a mistake? And I was, and they let me slip in. But so after getting reacclimated to school, really enjoyed just the conversations with people. And honestly, for me, and this is something I will definitely give the advice to any military person or anyone really in general who's thinking about an MBA is the quality of the conversations and the learning opportunities that you'll get there are pretty much unparalleled. Just you'll be, at least for me, it's coming from the military, like I just didn't have the background in a lot of these topics that they were discussing in class or discussing outside of class that they've dealt with in their careers or in their lives, that just very different from what I had experienced. So that was a way to accelerate that learning quite significantly within those 2 years, because there's always the trade-off or the I guess the conversation with folks who are thinking about getting out of the military is, do I go back to school, kind of have a chance to maybe level up to another level, once I do enter the civilian workforce, or do I start working for those 2 years and make a salary? So it is the trade-off, because you're starting to enter prime earning years, and that's 2 years of salary that you're kind of giving up. So overall, I think it was the right choice, and I would definitely recommend business school to any of my peers in the military, but everyone outside as well. It's obviously personal choice and a lot of different dependencies, but it was great for me. But just in terms of when I was leaving Harvard or looking at what I wanted to do next, in addition to geographies and kind of wanting to figure out where I wanted to settle down, I was looking at different industries. The consulting route was interesting. I think the kind of the thinking model and like the problem solving model that consulting firms put into folks that as they join, and how to think about a problem and how to go about hopefully solving that, and really just laying out all the different dependencies within a decision in an organization would have been really interesting to really experience firsthand. A lot of the feedback was, you'll do consulting for 2 years and then go do something else. So I was like, why do I want to do that if I'm going to spend 2 years doing something I know I'm not going to enjoy? I really started to look at what are some of the frontier technologies that one will set me up for a lasting career, as these things continue to evolve, and so we can kind of be able to ride a wave of technologies, to different opportunities. But also, how do we kind of create the future here? I've always kind of been, I hate to use the word like techno optimist, because I think there's like a breed of within tech of like this like biohacking and things that kind of gets a little quirky sometimes. But I am definitely a believer that a lot of the great things about what we have currently and where we're going will be enabled by technology. So how do I help build what that future is? So I started looking into things like drones and robotics, and there was a little bit early, I think, at that point, drones had sort of been, it was at the peak of the hype cycle, and it was on its way down towards, kind of the pit of despair, or whatever the terminology is there, in terms of how do you adopt that large scale within an organization. Obviously, the military has its applications. Hobbyists were using drones, but how do you really bring that into an organization for agriculture and sustainability and just overall infrastructure monitoring? So started to look at what are the technologies that will enable that, and that was artificial intelligence was kind of the one that it seemed like it was primed to help revolutionize what those industries are. So AI and autonomy. So found a company called Spark Cognition down here in Austin, which is an industrial AI company. a lot of oil and gas, kind of predictive maintenance, monitoring of different assets, different factory lines for food and beverage manufacturing, some cybersecurity aspects. So joined there, was at the company for almost 3 years. Started
So
out.
are these guys at the point, are they like coming to Harvard and canvassing the people that are graduating, or was this you sort of like, hey, I've done the military and now I've got this business qualification, or really really prestigious degree, and I'm taking it out to the world? Or was the path a bit more
Yeah,
aligned?
yeah, it was. So at that point, I had sort of settled in on a couple target cities where I wanted to be, and I was
Right.
looking for companies within those geographies where maybe really interesting, to work for those companies. So they weren't recruiting on campus. I was just doing my research, and a sense I can't even tell you how many emails to different companies around the country. I was looking at Austin and Denver and San Diego, and a lot of great conversations. But it's also coming out of the military, coming out of business school, and trying to go to a AI startup. They're kind of like, we don't really know what to do with you. Like, it sounds interesting, there might be something here, but like we don't have a spot for you right now. So there's a lot of great conversations, but also a lot of thanks, but let us know what you end up doing.
So actually, you were driving quite a lot of the.
Plus, yeah.
So again, that's like really interesting, because I get lots of people who ask me, how do I make a career pivot? So that might be people that are already in business, or already in sales, or they might want to, they've sold, I don't know, telecoms their whole life, and they want to go and sell something that's connected to a purpose, so a tech for good, so sustainability or climate, or whatever that might be, and they find that really tough to do. But along with your story, actually, you need to be very proactive. You need to knock on quite a lot of doors, it sounds, and get quite a lot of rejection.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of conversation, a lot of rejection, just a lot of the time that ends up being spent on that. There were firms that were recruiting on campus, which would have been in kind of maybe an easier route to go for, but they were typically the banks and the consulting firms, which I had sort of at that point decided I wanted to go into tech. The tech firms were the Googles, Amazons that were coming to campus, and after coming from a very bureaucratic large organization, the last thing I wanted to do was go. I mean, they're great organizations. Obviously, the pay would have been great, and there would have been would have learned a lot. At that time, it was just it was going to be more processes that I would need to learn rather than kind of processes that I could help build. I think that I thought at the time, and I still stand behind that, is like the learning experiences you get at a startup or a scale up are just unmatched compared to what you would get at a larger company, where you'd be very siloed and wouldn't have visibility into how decisions are made, or how things are just built from the ground up, because a lot of that's already in place when you come in, and you kind of go between the lines that you're told to walk between, rather than being able to kind of help create what that is. So that was my thought process at the time, and since then I've continued to be within startups and scale ups, as well as we're trying to turn Skyfi into a lasting business, and go from startup stage to now we are a fast growing company. Like, that's the really exciting part, and where a lot of the, I think, professional development and just personal development comes in for that. So but yeah, back to your question about kind of the efforts on how do you make the career pivot. There's, I would say, email like everyone, and you can find in the companies that you're interested in. Find the titles that maybe have some sort of relevance to the types of things that you do, and just send them an email. The worst thing they can do is, even worse than them saying no, is they just don't respond. But other than that, like, they say, hey, thanks for reaching out. Nothing now, but at least at that point they've seen your name. They may know you if you submit an application later. It's an opportunity to have a conversation, and that helped me get a job both at Spark Cognition, which was where I was before Skyfi, and also at Skyfi, which I'll talk about kind of how I found this role here. But after spending a few years at Spark Cognition doing a little bit of program management on the R&D side of it, a little bit of product management, primarily on kind of what is the new markets for AI technology. And this was pre-AI boom. Like, this was unfortunate for the company. They were a little bit early for the this current wave of AI. It was still interesting. It was getting funding, but it's nothing like kind of the current companies are. So little bit early on that, and then finished out doing a little bit of ops and strategy work as well with our CTO. So yeah, and just at the time.
How technically minded are you at your entry point? So you've got obviously this amazing experience in the military. You've got this really prestigious qualification, and you're going into AI. I mean, I've worked in tech for like 20 years, and even I'm like, I find the theory of AI quite complex.
Yeah.
So how strong was your technical understanding going into that business?
Yeah, so I'd taken a couple of courses, just online courses before I started. And as I was thinking about AI as a potential career path and, wanted to join a company. So I took some like Coursera courses. There was an intro to AI course and a couple others just on, what are the basics of machine learning?
Hmm.
What are different types of, supervised versus unsupervised learning and the different methods, that may be employed just to have a kind of at least a high level understanding. So when, someone starts talking on the first day, I don't have to ask the dumb question of like, what is supervised learning? Not necessarily a dumb question. I don't expect people to know what that is, but at least as I'm joining the company to at least speak a little bit of the language. But part of that was clearing up as I was in the interview process. Also, at what level am I expected to be able to speak to some of this, and and knowing that I would pick up a lot of that, kind of over time. So it's one of those things where I think I'm naturally a curious person and enjoy kind of the lifelong learning aspect of it. So I was kind of doing my homework pre-joining, but then also as I was at the company, really trying to talk to engineers, product managers and others on the team about why this technology versus another technology to solve a certain problem, and really trying to figure out how do we turn maybe one project for a customer into something that we can pivot that into another customer also, and really kind of reuse some of the technologies that we're building. And that was really when I was in the kind of the product manager role when I was at the company on how do we take existing things and not recycle it, but essentially repackage it in a way or use bits of effort that we had already put in place to solve a new problem for a new customer. So that was, I think, a really interesting way to kind of learn quickly about that, is just really talking to people about what are they doing and why are they making those types of decisions when they're building these applications. But overall it is like it was totally a fire hose experience when I joined the company around learning AI, but it's all things that it's learnable. Even I'm not I don't know Python. I'm not a developer. Could develop machine learning applications. My role was primarily how do I translate what the customer is looking for into something that an engineer can understand and take action on, and then vice versa. When an engineer is saying I'm doing X, Y, and Z with this algorithm, I'm using this one rather than this one because of whatever the circumstance, being able to tell the customer at a high level in a way that makes sense. So it's kind of the translation service, which I think there's a little bit that comes out within the military as well as you just have different stakeholders that have different views and different understandings of whether it's aviation capabilities or various weapon systems, or just things that they have an end need, and we need to figure out how do we meet that need. So it's how do you between different stakeholders in a way that aligns them. It's something that I think most people in the military would experience to some extent, which translates over into the business world pretty well.
So you go into Spa, and that gets you onto this path then of this new world, and it sounds like you go in and you're a bit like I'm going to pretend I know exactly what I'm doing here, but secretly I don't really know. And then you figure out your way, and you find this path, and you have a good period there. So where did Skyfi come from? Because looking at it, if I've understood this right, if I've read this right, it looks to me that you were probably one of the first people in that business. They're not a very old business, and you've not been there a long time, have you? So what's the story there?
Yeah. So let's see. This was back in 2022, or sorry, end of 2021, early 2022. Just looking around for what's potentially the next role. I wanted to stay in Austin. At that point, I was still enjoying the time at Spark, but I felt like the opportunities for continued learning and really taking on more responsibilities were it was a little bit siloed. I wanted to be one of the ones who was in the room where a lot of the big decisions were being made, and really I wanted to accelerate the learning after having experienced corporate life for a couple of years, and there was a really, it was a mid-stage startup, so it wasn't super corporate, but experiencing the civilian world for a few years. What is the way to really accelerate the learning opportunities, to potentially in the future start my own company, or be a co-founder, or be a venture capitalist, the things that I would need to understand at a very early stage company. So I wanted to join something that was around a seed stage or pre-seed company. So that limits the pool of available companies quite a bit, because a lot of them don't advertise roles either. They're typically going out and looking for specific engineers, and they're not hiring folks who are in a ops and strategy and product management role. It's generally a later hire. So pool shrunk from there. Wanted to be in Austin, pool shrunk further on that. So really just started to look around, and I realized that chief of staff was probably at least from a title standpoint, could be a way to accelerate what these learning opportunities are. Have work right hand with the CEO, or other leadership members, and just learn about what they're thinking about, what keeps them up at night, what are the problems they're trying to solve, and how can I lend a hand in that. So despite chief of staff probably being the most nebulous term in business, because it could be anything to any company, from very tactical to an early stage company to very strategic at a larger company. That's where I really focused my job search, and I was looking at anything from seed up through Series B, C, which is where there was more opportunities for actually published chief of staff roles, and that's something they were starting to think about once you get to the later stage. So, despite wanting to be at a seed stage, I was finding myself in conversations with a lot of Series B companies. It was really interesting. This was right, in the middle of COVID, in 2021, when I was doing this. So it was a lot of, kind of hybrid type roles or remote roles. And really didn't get much traction in terms of, solidifying a role. So I was about to hang up the job search a little bit when I.
So was this because the similar problem to before, where they couldn't quite pin where to put you?
Yeah, it very much so. I didn't have, I was looking at companies everything from, fintech to AI to just, consumer tech, or just like consumer packaged goods. So I was just really interested and wanted to learn what a chief of staff would do. So I was in conversations with quite a bit. And it was either, your background's interesting, but, you're not technical enough to really, this, or you don't have the industry experience for like fintech was, for example, is, feedback I would get. I have enough finance background to be dangerous coming, out of the MBA program, but I don't have like deep experience in fintech, which is something that they were looking for. So, at that point, I was about to hang up the job search. I was a little bit frustrated on it, and it was during COVID. It was kind of crazy times for recruiting. Everyone's just like changing jobs all the time, and there's a lot of people that were interviewing for roles, and it was just kind of a wild time to be interviewing. But I had been subscribing to some tech newsletters of things that were happening in Austin, just to kind of keep a pulse on it. Not really expecting that I would find a potential job there, but I just wanted to learn like who are the cool companies that are doing things, who's getting funded, what are some technologies that I should just be aware of, that may be either interesting for future companies to work at, or future companies just to know people at within the city. So one day I would skim them, kind of delete the newsletters, and one day I decided, it was like, I kind of dove into it, and I saw Skyfi raises $7 million as it comes out of stealth, whatever the title was. It said, I've never heard of Skyfi before. This, what is it? It had a little blurb about satellite technology. I've always been, kind of a nerd about maps. I was like the kid in the back of the car during road trips, was looking at like the paper map and following where we were going. So I always thought that kind of stuff was interesting. And in my military career, using, maps and imagery data to a certain extent. And I'll get into that a little bit too, just around, as that relates to Skyfi and how we can improve things just for, both commercial users, but also for defense users as well. So started looking at, into the company. They had for a company that just came out of stealth, like a really cool looking webpage, which is that's actually one of my first, I guess, gating criteria. If a company has a website that looks cool, I'm like, all right, you put thought into this.
Yeah.
Now I'm interested. If it doesn't look like anything, I'm like, all right, well, I don't really know if you're serious or not. So they had a cool looking website. So they passed one of my first tests. And then I found their LinkedIn page, which they seemed like a legitimate business, and there was actually a role that was posted for a BD manager role. So applied for that just threw my name in the hat. It was one of the quick, LinkedIn, apply now buttons. That was an opportunity, even though I hadn't done BD before. I thought, maybe it's something I could do, especially at an early stage company. But at the very least, it's a way to have a conversation with these folks. So submitted an application for a role that was outside of the chief of staff, which I was looking for. More as just that this seems like an interesting company. And then I got an email back from a guy named Mark, who was then the COO. He's since retired and gone on to living great life with his young kids and over in Houston. But so he reached out. He said, "We just filled this role, but your background's super interesting. Would you like to have a call?" So at that point, I was like, "Yeah, I'd be stupid not to at least have a phone call here." So I talked to Mark. Told him a little bit what I, was, my background, what I'd been, looking for, in a job. He told me more about Skyfi and what the vision was. And then I was really interested in it. How do you make imagery data accessible to a whole bunch of users, whether those are agriculture users or hedge fund users, which I can kind of go into the origin story.
Because your user base is massive, isn't it? Is one of the things I noticed. So in the geospatial, that data analytics part of the tech market, I'll find that you'll get some businesses that are really niche, so like they'll do something really like forestry management or wildfire prevention or something really focused, and it looks like you guys have got like a bit of a broader offering to different verticals, which is cool.
Yeah, we've got I couldn't even tell you all the different verticals and the different use cases that we have coming in all the time. It's a very broad market, which has its challenges, to be honest. And we can talk about that too. There's opportunities kind of in if there's an industry out there, I can probably come up with a way where Earth observation data can help, or it can at least play a role in that. So there's so much out there that it does create challenges just around focus and where do we really hone in on what the offerings are and towards a target market, because there's a lot that that's out there that seems like potential target markets, and it's just so there's there's some challenges there. I'm sure we'll get into some of that. So Mark and I had this conversation. He said, we just filled this role, but why don't you talk to Luke, who's the CEO? You guys have similar backgrounds. Luke was in the Army, flew helicopters, went to Stanford Business School. It was kind of been in tech since then, and seemed like we had a lot of overlap. So I was like, yeah, absolutely, I'll talk to Luke. Again, not really knowing if this was going to go anywhere, but Luke is in Austin, so maybe a chance to meet up for coffee and at least kind of know someone with a similar background. So got on a call with Luke, told him what I had been interested in, or the types of roles I was looking for, and what I potentially want to do in the future. At this point I was thinking of it, even if there's nothing at Skyfi, Luke knows people. He was at a venture capital firm before that. So maybe there's an opportunity for some introductions. So at the end of the call, he said, "Well, you said you've been interested in chief of staff things. I've been thinking about a chief of staff. I just don't know what that role entails. Could you help me out here?" So he said, "Why don't you spend the weekend, come up with a list of bullet points, literally just come up with a list, send it to me, and we'll continue on with the chat." So I spent the weekend, looking at all my old job applications for chief of staff that I had submitted, roles that I had been interested in, that I was looking forward. What does a pre-seed company need from a chief of staff? Knowing kind of who was on the team, which was some engineers, Luke, and then Mark on the operation side of it. And it was kind of like, well, it seems like there's a need to fill out, on both on the product side of it, but also just a lot of the day-to-day things that frankly, Luke is a CEO of an early company. He's not going to have the time to do. So I was willing to get my hands dirty and just kind of dive into things, whether it's facilities. This was kind of, we were kind of getting ready to stand up an office here in Austin. What does it take to really get IT systems going? All of the Google Workspace, which we use, and all of the cloud infrastructure that the engineering team was going to need, and kind of all of those things that I didn't know a ton about, but I also figured how hard could it be to go about getting Google Workspace set up, with talking to vendors on this. That's all things that's solvable. That seemed honestly very fun to just kind of do these things that or like low-hanging fruit at a company, but we'll really just kind of help enable it. So I knew it was going to be very tactical. There wasn't anyone with like finance experience. I was like, I had a couple semesters of finance, but, I can do some of these things. So set up a list of things that would be interesting that maybe they would need to get their feedback. It looks like, this sounds great. We definitely need someone who can do these types of things. Why don't you talk to a couple other few folks on the team? He put me in touch with Bill, who's his co-founder, Bill Perkins, who's a hedge fund manager out of Houston, oil and gas trader. He's a professional poker player,
Sounds cool.
Book author, movie director, like very eclectic background in terms of like everything he's done, but super successful. And this is kind of where I get into the origin story of Skyfi. But talked to Bill and had like one of the most entertaining phone conversations I think I've ever had. We're scheduled for like 30 minutes. We went for like an hour and a half, just like hearing about his vision for what Skyfi is, and why he wanted to start it, and why he's willing to risk a lot of his own money to really get this started. And I guess just to go into the origin story of it, Bill's a hedge fund manager, oil and gas trader. He's trying to buy a ton of satellite imagery for his hedge fund. They're looking at natural gas well pads around the country, and he's since turned this part of it into our sister company, Synmax. But he's talking to companies around the world. He's flying to on site to meet with some of these satellite companies. He's almost literally got a $1 million check in his hands. Figuratively, he's willing to spend that right now on it. And it's what's your use case? How much are you going to buy this year? How much are you going to buy next year? It's weeks and weeks and negotiations. He said, I can buy a car online. I can buy a house online. I can get anything delivered to my house in under an hour. Like, why do I have to go through a weeks-long negotiation with satellite companies to get imagery? There's got to be an easier way to do this. So that was really the story or the origin story for Skyfi is, how do we make that easy? And he got in touch with Luke through a mutual connection of theirs. Luke was looking at doing something similar around using data off of drones and autonomous aircraft. Luke was previously at a company, electric aviation company called Joby. He was at Uber Elevate on their electric aviation arm. So if you're flying these machines, you're collecting a lot of data. You need a lot of data also to fly this. So how do you monetize that? So they essentially joined forces in terms of getting data about the Earth and what's going on the Earth, into one easy to use platform, and that was how Skyfi started. So had a great conversation with Bill, super entertaining, talking about where he sees this going, and the analytics that will power all of this, and just really the user experience, on both the web and mobile, which is something nobody was doing when geospatial is mobile. I think we're aside from maybe one other company, like we're really the only one who has a mobile application where we can do everything you can do on our web app, because this is where kind of meet the users where they are. Mobile is continuing to obviously it's fully ingrained in everything we do right now. It becomes more and more of processes within business, and more will be using these mobile technologies as well, especially as these things get scaled more on the geospatial side of it. It'll become much more powerful. And the thesis is in the future we'll be using geospatial technology in ways that it's just transparent to everyone day to day. You kind of look back to the analogy we use is like GPS technology, where years ago it was only for military guidance systems for weaponry, and now here we are, and everyone's got 2 to 3 GPS devices on them at any time, and you don't even think about it. You're just like, I want to go from point A to point B. You put it in Google Maps, Apple Maps, and it tells you how to get there. You're using GPS that entire time, and it's totally transparent how that's happening. So that's where we see geospatial going in the future as we get more sensors into space, as we get much more, and we'll talk more, I think, about some of the AI applications around analytics too. Is like, once you can start processing data at machine scale and machine speed, we're going to reach a point where we don't have enough data, which is great for the geospatial industry, and that's where things will really start to, I think, come to fruition in terms of everything that this industry is kind of, to use the phrase of one of our, from Joe Morrison, who's Earth observation guy at a company called Umbra, but he's also a pundit online. He said, after many years of eating glass, we'll finally come to the promised land. In terms of really just bringing this technology into businesses, to consumers, to governments in a way where all of this is happening in the background and powering decisions, and users aren't even really aware that that's taking place.
Where do you think the biggest opportunity is for the tech? Like which sort of market sector? So a lot of the stuff I'm reading, a lot of what my customers are telling me is like agriculture is like a really big area where they see food production, sustainable food production, all that stuff. Where are you guys sort of seeing it?
Yeah, we see agriculture as a huge market. I think just by dollar volume, they're like the largest purchaser outside of the government. They're
Hmm.
almost customer number one. The U.S. and particularly Europe, but a lot of the Asian governments are picking up a lot of their investment too. So I think there's a lot there. But on the agriculture side of it, they're probably the next largest spender on data. The hard part about agriculture is just the scale of it. That we're talking like global food stocks,
Mm.
getting, data about, like essentially agricultural production and, what is the supply at country or continent type scale, which makes it very difficult to capture enough data for that. There's great companies like Planet that are doing daily remapping at kind of lower resolution, which is great use cases for it. We see, there's going to be more and more sensors that are going up that are specifically for agriculture, but it's really, how do you identify, at these large levels, like, the things
Mm.
that move the needle. And in agriculture, a lot of the margins are pretty small. So, it really needs to be incredibly accurate in order to move the needle on a lot of these agriculture applications. So I think we'll definitely get there as more and more sensors go up, and, being able to use AI to really just, draw some very interesting and accurate conclusions out of it. But yeah, really that's the difficult part is scale there. See a lot on kind of infrastructure development and just
Right.
kind of sustainable infrastructure development. But then that goes from everything from what is like, how do we map like what is the water usage or water availability around different cities as development continues. Like that's development is not going to stop, obviously, around the world, and there's a lot of developing nations that are, will be resource constrained, and how do we use that technology in order to not just monitor what's happening around some of this development, but help enable them to make smart choices about their different development designs, how they're thinking about kind of cities of the future. There's multiple different ways to do that. So we are seeing quite a bit of interest from commercial customers and governments in the Middle East and Africa and Asia on that type of technology. And then lastly, just the last other industry that I think will be interesting is the maritime industry, which
Oh,
is,
okay, that's
yeah,
interesting.
so it's a problem of scale to some extent, where you just think of how much of the ocean is water, and most of the time satellites are not capturing imagery of the water. When they're flying over the ocean, they're typically not going to be capturing unless someone is tasking that image. Which when you're in open ocean, like how do you know where a ship is going to be in order to task that? It's just it's a very hard problem to solve. Companies like Cinmax, who's our sister company, is working on that problem and is doing, I think, very well on that. But how do you monitor illegal fishing and kind of these
Yeah, yeah.
dark vessels that are evading sanctions and doing essentially oil smuggling or various other smuggling activities, which have implications not just for kind of the sustainability and biodiversity when you can think of kind of the illegal fishing aspect of it, but
Mm.
also geopolitically, who are the nation states that are taking place in some of these activities? How do we monitor that? How do we be transparent about that type of activity that's going on? Because I think maritime is one of those things that people they just know that their things show up on time.
Yeah, yeah.
Like consumers, like they just expect that their supermarkets will have a stockpile of, or they'll have the inventory of the goods that they're looking for. When a lot of that stuff is going to come from overseas, or just there's these global supply chains. It's just so interconnected, and there's just coming from my Navy background, I just know how fragile some of that can be. If
Oh
there's
yeah,
just,
totally. Yeah.
if you look at what's happening over in Yemen, or when the Suez Canal was blocked, it's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
like everything just gets completely disrupted, and it's a finely oiled machine, well-oiled machine, but it's very fragile at the same extent. So how do we monitor what's happening to enable kind of the continuation of what we know to be, these global supply chains, while also having transparency into some of the things that are going on, that we probably want to know what's happening as it relates to sanctions evading, with grain and oil shipments, and it's kind of these super interesting use cases. So anyways, there's a lot of data being collected about that. It's a very hard problem, but I think we'll see that continue to grow too.
So it's really cool that you're like able to tap into so many different markets and attempt to fix so many problems that are like so relevant in everybody's lives, that have such a big knock-on ripple effect, don't they? All the people might not necessarily understand the complexity of it from this point, but the end point is like you can really make a big difference to the way people live basically every day through the tech that you've got. So taking you back to like that bit where you came into the startup environment, what were the what were the biggest surprises for you, or what were the biggest challenges when you think about going from like military looks like this, then you've gone to a tech business that, correct me if I'm wrong, but it felt a bit more sort of small, medium size when you went into Spark. It wasn't, and then you've gone into total like scale up, and we were talking before the call about you working from home and stuff, and how what were the surprises? How have you actually done that? Because I imagine that's quite hard from just a day to day, like how the hell do I do this type view.
Exactly. Yeah. There's at that point when I joined, there was so much that could be done that it became very much a prioritization exercise, which is I think as a scale up is like one of the biggest skills is being able to prioritize, or the biggest challenge is also is prioritizing some of that. So when you come in, there's like a whole laundry list of tasks that need to be done. So it's which are the ones that are going to move the needle the furthest, the quickest, and frankly coming in not necessarily knowing what all of these would entail. So it's kind of like a trying to do some estimations around level of effort, but also when some of these tasks need to be done. And again, this is still very tactical, while also trying to build out what does this team look like, and helping Luke on kind of the HR aspect and hiring, and kind of helping to set what the culture is as an early stage company. So coming in, it was surprising. I knew that there wasn't going to be a whole lot in place. But coming in, I was like, wow, we really have like a lot of work to do, which is exciting. It was one of those things where you can come to work every day knowing you're going to accomplish something that's going to like make a difference, and to do their job better, or is something that we need to do in order to just to be a legitimate company, to be honest. So that's the very exciting part, where every day there's you log off at night. That's not like you're logging off in the afternoon. You're logging off at 10 p.m., 11 p.m. But you've accomplished quite a bit for the day. So let's say the challenges at the time was we had this thesis or this theory about if you just make it easy for people to access it, if you're transparent about your pricing, that's you're 50% of the way there. And then we just got to make the technology, make the connections on the backside of it. We'll be rocking and rolling at that point. So I would say the challenge was, one, we have this thesis, but how do we translate, how do we understand who the customer really is? How do we translate this into a web and mobile application? Like mobile was something we were thinking about from the start. How do we build out? How do we do this quickly? Also, because we know, if we have this idea, or if Bill and Luke had this idea, you can guarantee that others have it. So speed is going to be our advantage, and we need to really ramp up the team quickly. As it relates to more of the technical side of it. That we could fill in the pieces on some of the on the operation side of it and business development side of it, but it's more of, we really needed to get the technology moving quickly. So we had a CTO who came in, Crossen, he's based in Bulgaria. He's actually interesting. He was a West Point graduate, and he went back to Bulgaria, ended up not serving. They didn't recognize West Point as like a commissioning source. Right. Weird, but anyways, he was at Uber, a bunch of other American companies, in Bulgaria, and had built out a great network. So we were able to hire out of his network very quickly, I would say in a cost-effective manner, where we could bring on a lot of engineers to develop this. So we really ramped up very quickly, and it took the bet. And this was kind of a strategic move on the part of Bill and Luke and the rest of the leadership team is, we need to move quickly in order to kind of seize what we see as a market opportunity. So we're going to take the bet. We're going to hire a lot of people very quickly. So primarily engineers, we grew. I think there's a period where we were adding engineers, more than once a month, for a good 6 to 8 months. Really bringing on the team in order to just accelerate with this, because we knew we had a lot of work to do. Which at that point we're going from a very early stage startup, and now we're like, we don't have the processes in place to necessarily onboard these people and to make sure that they've and really like set the culture, because at this point it's fully remote. We originally it was kind of a core team in Austin and really in Texas, Austin and Houston, and now here we are, a global workforce. And just sort of happened that way. I don't know that necessarily when the company was started, the idea was to be this global workforce as early as we were, but that's sort of the path that it took. And I stand by that. That was the right decision to make. We've got great talent, great engineers all over the world. We've been able to manage as a remote, and partially hybrid workforce as well. But so it brings into the cultural challenges, some of the time zone challenges around, how do you work remotely across multiple time zones with, internationally on that, and just trying to build out like what is the culture of the company, and really kind of coalesce. And this was early at the company too. It's like the customer is the guiding principle. Like whatever the customer is saying, like that's our truth right there. So as we kind of think about what do we need to do from a product development standpoint, and just model our company around, like how can we most efficiently take in customer feedback, turn that into a requirement, and then build to that requirement. And that's something that we've continued to do, rather than thinking that we're smarter than the customers, trying to take their feedback very much to heart. And that's something that, Luke and the rest of us will harp on repeatedly is, feedback is a gift. And whether that's coming from a customer or from others internally to the company, like that's the best gift someone can give us is feedback, whether it's, yes, this is exactly what I want to see. This is how I want, things to be built, or this is completely wrong. This is what I want. Now go ahead and do that. Like that is I think the best way to build kind of what this product is really just use that customer feedback and take it to heart, and not try and act like better than the customer because you came up with this idea for it. It's like they will tell you exactly how they're going to spend their dollars.
So how have you it's funny you mentioned the culture, because it came up, I was thinking it as you said it. Have you actually done that, just from that simple, you're in this mission, you're growing the business, everybody's coming in, we're hiring more talent, we need this person to do that job, we need that person to do that job, great. How have you actually I don't know, built those relationships, or how have you actually maintained an identity of what it is to work when everyone's like a million miles an hour, there's a ton of stuff to do, everyone's working across all these time zones, you're working remotely. How have you actually built those relationships with people?
So really it's a lot of it is over communication, trying to be very our Slack is going off constantly. Like and it's actually one of the challenges of being a remote company is kind of fatigue about messaging systems, whether it's going to be any company, whether it's using Slack, using Teams, there's so much to catch up on that it's often it can be difficult because there's so much happening every day. But really just trying to over communicate that, both in messaging and in various meetings, and also trying not to like overburden people with meetings. That's kind of one of our things too is meetings do not equal work. So if there's something that can be a Slack post, or we can talk about it in the all hands, try and reserve it for that rather than more and more meetings that are just taking away from some of the development time that work can actually be done. But regular all hands calls, regular updates on here are the priorities, here's what we're building for, here's what customers are saying. We have our customer feedback channel and our customers channel. They're incredibly active, and as soon as something gets posted in there, it's like everyone's there just like, all right, what did the customer say, what are they interested in, how is this gonna, how do we either incorporate this or add this into the backlog on the roadmap. And then we've also done some team meetups, which has been great. Also we've had within Europe, either European meetups where everyone kind of comes into a certain location, or we've brought over some of our US folks, specifically on the technical side to meet with their engineering counterparts over in Europe and have kind of these dialogues and brainstorming sessions. We've done some US meetups where we bring the US team into Austin. So far, we haven't done a full international offsite.
Right.
Hopefully, with some additional, in the next funding round, we'll be able to bring everyone together to kind of a neutral location and really get everyone to meet each other. But that's just some of the ways that we've gone about trying to keep up with those relationships. I'll fully admit it's difficult across time zones sometimes, and it's just there's things that get lost in Slack messages or on Zoom calls where kind of the intent is one thing, but it's kind of it's just over communication and clarification, and there's the like every company we've gone through and it's a cycle that continues with the forming, norming, storming, performing. Norming, performing. That kind of happens at each stage of the company as it grows. There's the early stage conflict, and then coalescing around a set of norms, and then you kind of grow a little bit, and then it starts to repeat over again as you add more people. So like every company, we get through that, but I think part of it is just recognizing that that's the natural part of the company, and not trying to shy away from that, but kind of leaning into that a little bit as well.
And how have you found in terms of like leading people or managing people or getting the best performance out of people, especially when they're remote? So are you finding like checking in with people? If you've not heard from somebody all day, you're thinking, are you actually doing some work? I bet it's 4 o'clock. Like, I'm going to check in with you, or are you kind of like, I'm just going to give people the autonomy, and they know the expectation. We've got a team meet up tomorrow. If they turn up and they've not done any work, they're going to, how's it? What's worked the best?
Yeah. So, for me, I'm lucky. I have a fantastic team on the ops and product side of it, and everyone in the company is great. But the team, they understand the intent. That's something I try to do regularly is set what the priorities are, communicate the priorities, what needs to be done, and let them work. I'm not one who's going to check in every day at 4 p.m. or regularly. What's the status of this? They understand that if there's a deadline set, that's when the deadline is intended to be met. If they need an extension for it, just let me know. I think I'm pretty reasonable when it comes to that. I understand that you'll have multiple competing priorities, and it's something I definitely ask for honest feedback from the team too. If there's things that they either don't agree with or that they don't think they can get done in a certain time frame based on what's expected, just bring that up early. It's not something where we get to the kind of getting closer to the deadline, it's all of a sudden can't do this, never could have done this. Like, that's not the right time for that. So I'm generally of one who will put a lot of trust in what the team is, and they've earned the trust, for sure. So I want to let them kind of manage their time, manage their priorities, and get the work done without coming in and asking for regular status updates. We do have check-in meetings as the team, both on an ops sync every week, a product sync every week. A chance for us to kind of all to get together and just talk about things that we're working on or any help that we need. But I find that by not necessarily or not trying not to micromanage and kind of get regular updates on that, they trust me more to kind of essentially everyone wants to perform well, but they also trust them kind of do their work without coming in over the top on some of these things. So that's something I definitely try to continue on with is just trust in the team, and I think that's something as a scale up that's something you have to do. Like, it can be scary sometimes to once you start adding more and more people to the team and they're taking things that I used to do or others on the team used to do, to let go of some of that, because you just kind of know what needs to be done. Sometimes it's a little bit on autopilot, and then giving it to someone else on the team, you're kind of like, all right, well, you're off the monitor for a little bit, but for the most part, you just kind of have to let go and trust that they're going to get it done. And I do find that people, it is just in general, not just at Skyfi, but people want to be in their comfort zone sometimes. That's not where they really thrive, is within their comfort zone. So giving them more and more that's a little bit on the fringes of what their previous responsibility was, or continue to grow what that responsibility is how they continue to grow as an individual too. So that's something to try to do, is give them tasks that are more complex. How do we bring the future vision of Skyfi forward, and having them either brainstorm about that or start putting some design mock-ups in place, or developing what could this type of process look like as we go into the next phase of what the company is. So really kind of helping to bring them along with some of the conversations that are happening at the kind of leadership level as well.
And do you think that leadership style that you've got there, which is like it's very you use the word vision there. I think when you've got a leadership style that it is more visionary than micromanaging. It's more like, I'm going to give you the autonomy, I'm going to give you the trust, but here's what we need to achieve as a team. Here's where we're headed. Here's where we're trying to get to. Do you think that's come from your military days, or is that totally different? I imagine the military might be a bit more micromanaging. Where do you think the actual style has been honed?
Yeah, I think a lot of it came from the military. In a sense, you're right that there are leaders in the military who are very much micromanaging, and
Right.
there's a lot of systems that are set up to be micromanaging in their own sense. But there's kind of a term in the military of commander's intent, which is basically whether it's the commanding officer, the general, whoever's in charge of the mission or the unit or whatever scope that it is. And this can be someone from a junior officer who's just has like a small group of people and they need to set what their intent is, all the way up to a large scale operation who would have a general running it. There's always a commander's intent. Like, here is the objective at the end of the day. Regardless of how we get there, this is what we need to accomplish. And then from there, there's a lot of, there's essentially explicit tasks and implicit tasks or implied
Mm-hmm.
tasks that come out of that. So those will be, delineated, but then there's others that, the explicit tasks are one that will be kind of delineated by, the leadership, that this shall get done in order to accomplish a mission, or we just need to do this because, that's what either the regulation is or, kind of just what the requirements are. Then there's all the implied tasks that go around that. And that's not something that the kind of leadership is going to say, you shall do this in order to accomplish the goal. Like, it's really up to the units or to the individual to figure out what that is. Because at the end of the day, those people are the experts in the individual
Yeah.
in that individual component. It's not going to be the person who's setting what the intent is. So that's kind of what I try to get to with my leadership styles. Here's the intent. Here's where we want to get to at a certain time. Here's the goal, the deadline for it. You all are your experts in your respective fields. Let me know what needs to be done and what help you need. Also, that's something where I need to know where I can either help provide resources or provide guidance, or bring in others on the team to help what that is. But it's really up, again, back to trusting the folks on the team. They're in positions. Here we've hired people. We think hiring is the most important thing that we do. They wouldn't be on the team if we didn't trust them to both have the knowledge and the skills and the ability to do this and the motivation to do this. So kind of going back and trusting them on, you're in this position for a reason. You know your stuff. Now let's just go execute it. And that's kind of the leadership I try to bring in.
Which I think is really interesting. It's really I think it is really, really relevant in the working world that we're in now, where there's so many more remote working roles, and like you guys, you've got people across different countries, different continents. People really do want that autonomy and that trust. But as a leader, the world of sales or tech leadership is very different to 10 years ago, where it would be like you might find yourself face to face with people a lot more. So it's interesting that you've used those earlier experiences and techniques and brought them into this role, and it sounds like it's working really, really well. So we're nearly out of time, but this has been so cool, Mike. So thank you so much for taking the time to chat. Yeah. The question I want to end on, you talked about the vision of the business and where Skyfi are headed. So tell us a bit about that. What are the plans for the company? Where's it going? If there's folk out there who are thinking about scale up world, or they're already in geospatial and they want to transition to something different, what's exciting for you guys?
Yeah, so some of the things that are exciting for us is how do we we feel like we've come a long way to solving like that geospatial data access problem. How do you go about getting imagery? We've built this platform. This really it's really a marketplace for data and analytics. But how do you bring that together into a more of a data platform, rather than just a transactional marketplace for this data, where someone will come to Skyfi, get imagery, get analytics, and then they'll essentially turn over to their other monitor, bring it into another application, and that's where their workflow is. So we're kind of a supplier into a larger workflow that we don't have any visibility or any touch into that workflow. So it's how do we build out a platform where it's not just imagery data, but maybe we bring in government census data, or demographic data, and just all these other data sets that are collected around the world by governments, by private companies, into a platform where you can start then making correlations between, here's what the imagery is saying, here's what the statistical data is saying, here's a novel insight into something that's happening in the world. So this kind of data fusion and bringing this all together in a single platform, where we start to bring Skyfi into that workflow more so than we currently are. But then also, how do we enable customers to build their own workflows on top of Skyfi, so that they don't need their other platforms, or their other data sources, whether they have subscriptions to various other services, but offer that type of thing all within Skyfi, so that we can be that source, but also help them make those correlations. And obviously everything is AI these days. Be lying if I said we aren't looking at ways. How do we advance extracting insights from imagery, and how do we make correlations from imagery to the other data sets in a way that's easy to interpret? The last thing we want to do is just provide people more data. I think that's something that's a challenge that a lot of companies are facing. It's like, it's data overload all the time. And customers are definitely data fatigued to a certain point. When there's too much that they need to become an expert on. So it's the question is, and this is where if people are interested in this type of technology, is we could use some their help and expertise, and kind of their just their drive for doing this. Is how do we turn all of this into just an answer that someone can come into Skyfi and say, I want to learn, I want the answer to X. We go get the data for them. It's all happens behind the scenes. We just give them the answer that they can go to their, whether it's their supervisor, they can go to their own customer. They can go within their workflow and say, all right, here is what the data is telling us, and this is how we actually inform decision making, rather than bogging someone down in needing to interpret a satellite image. That's not what anybody wants. We want to tell them the answer at the end of the day, so that they can make something that's worthwhile.
That's cool. You're on a really interesting mission. It sounds really fantastic. I know you guys have been around for a few years, and it feels like early days, but you've already seemed to have achieved so much as an organization in a relatively short space of time. So it's really, really interesting, and I can't wait to put this episode out for everybody and hear your story.
Absolutely. Well, thanks a lot, James. Yeah, it's we've come a long way. We have a long way to go, and we love for if folks are interested in joining us on the mission, check out our careers page, follow us on LinkedIn, social media. We're super active on there. In addition to that, we also post a lot of cool stuff on social media. So really appreciate the opportunity. Really good talking to you.
Nice to chat to you. Cheers, Mike.
All right. See you, James.